The wrench slipped from my oil-stained fingers as I heard my daughter's voice drift through the garage window. It was past midnight, and I was under the hood of my battered Ford pickup, trying to fix a radiator leak that had been plaguing me for weeks. The November air in Lakewood cut through my work shirt like a blade, but what Marley said next froze me more than any Midwest winter ever could. Honestly, Dad, after what Mom experienced with Seth, you just seem boring. She says you're a great friend, but she needs a real man. I stayed crouched behind the engine block, my hands gripping the cold metal. Through the thin walls of our two-story colonial, I could hear Helena's laugh, that brittle sound she'd developed over the past 6 months. The same laugh she used at dinner parties when someone mentioned my HVAC business, like it was some quaint hobby instead of the company that built everything we owned. Your father is a good man, Marley. Helena's voice carried clearly now. But good men finish last. Seth understands ambition. He understands what it takes to climb higher. My sarcastic internal voice kicked in, the defense mechanism that had kept me sane through 18 years of marriage to a woman who treated social climbing like an Olympic sport. Well, add best friend to my resume. Next up, doormat. I wiped my hands on an old rag and stepped back from the truck. Lakewood stretched out beyond our driveway, faded banners from last year's harvest festival still hung between streetlights that flickered like dim fireflies. Mrs. Graff's curtains twitched in the house across the street. That woman had her nose pressed to the glass more often than a kid at a candy store. This town used to mean something. Back when the factory was running, when Main Street had more than 3 functioning businesses, when families like mine could build something real with honest work. I'd started Dornell Heating and Cooling with nothing but a used van and a toolbox my father left me. 16 years later, I employed 8 guys and serviced half the county. But Helena had outgrown blue-collar success somewhere along the way. She'd gotten her real estate license 3 years ago, started working for Pinnacle Properties downtown. That's where she met Seth Bannon, 44 years old, twice divorced, with a smile that could sell swampland to a farmer. He wore suits that cost more than most people's rent and drove an Audi that purred like a contented cat. I walked around to the front of the house, my work boots crunching on gravel. The living room windows glowed warm and yellow, and I could see Helena pacing while she talked to Marley. My wife had always been beautiful, auburn hair that caught light like copper wire, green eyes that could cut glass when she was angry. At 36, she still turned heads at the grocery store, but somewhere along the way, that beauty had hardened into something sharp and calculating. Seth took me to that new restaurant in Cleveland last week, Helena was saying, the one with the Michelin star. We talked about expanding the business, about real opportunities. Your father thinks changing the oil in his truck counts as a big weekend. Guilty as charged, I thought, though I prefer to think of it as maintaining the vehicle that pays for your designer handbags. I should have walked inside then. Should have confronted the conversation head-on, like a man with nothing to hide. Instead, I found myself moving toward the side window, drawn by the same morbid curiosity that makes people slow down at car accidents. Marley was sitting on the couch, her 17-year-old face lit by her phone screen. She'd inherited Helena's sharp features, but none of her mother's restraint. Mom, are you and Seth, together now? Because if you are, that's actually kind of cool. He's got that whole successful businessman thing going. Helena sat down beside her, smoothing her skirt. It's complicated, honey. Your father and we've grown apart. Seth understands my goals. He sees my potential. What about Dad's potential? Your father reached his potential years ago. He's comfortable with small-town life, with being ordinary. There's nothing wrong with that, but I want more. I pressed my back against the cold siding, my breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. 18 years of marriage, and she was discussing my limitations like I was a car that had outlived its usefulness. The worst part? She wasn't entirely wrong. I had gotten comfortable. While she was taking night classes and networking at Chamber of Commerce events, I was content to come home dirty, crack a beer, and watch whatever game was on television. But comfortable didn't mean worthless. Comfortable didn't mean I deserved to be relegated to the friend zone by my own wife. "So what happens now?" Marley asked. "Now we figure out how to transition. Your father is a good man, and he'll always be your father. But as for us..." Helena's voice trailed off, but the implication hung in the air like smoke. I'd heard enough. I walked back to the garage, my mind racing. 20 years ago, when I first met Helena at a college party, she'd been impressed by my confidence, my plans to start my own business. She'd said she loved how grounded I was, how real. Now those same qualities made me boring. The garage felt different when I returned. Smaller, somehow. My tools looked shabby under the fluorescent light. The calendar on the wall still showed October, and I realized I'd been so busy working I'd forgotten to flip it. Just another small failure in a growing collection. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through our text messages from the past week. Helena had been distant, but not hostile. Professional, almost, like she was managing a difficult client rather than communicating with her husband. Then I saw something that made my stomach drop. A message thread I didn't recognize, partially visible because Helena had left her iPad on the workbench earlier. She'd been using it to look up parts for the kitchen renovation we'd been planning. The screen had gone dark, but when I touched it, it lit up with her message app still open. The conversation was with someone labeled S with a heart emoji. S. "Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you. Helena. I feel like I'm finally awake after sleeping for years. S. When can we do it again? I've got the conference room reserved for Thursday afternoon. Helena. Perfect. Kai will be installing a system in Mentor all day. The messages continued, each one more intimate than the last. Photos I definitely shouldn't have seen. Details about their encounters that painted a picture of a relationship that had been going on for months, not weeks. But it was the final message that really twisted the knife. Helena. After last night, life with Kai feels like watching paint dry. You've reset my standards completely. I think it's time to reclassify him as a friend. S. Are you sure you're ready for that conversation? Helena. I already had it. Well, sort of. I told Marley first. Kai will figure it out soon enough. I set the iPad down carefully, my hands surprisingly steady. The garage was silent except for the hum of the space heater in the corner and the distant sound of traffic on Route 20. She wanted a friend, I thought. So I guess it's time to give her the gift of solitude. The next morning came too early and not early enough. I'd spent the rest of the night in the garage, not sleeping, just thinking. By the time Helena's alarm went off at 6:30, I had a plan forming in my mind like frost on a windshield. Slow, inevitable, and crystal clear. Helena moved through her morning routine with the efficiency of someone who had places to be and people to impress. She'd always been organized, but lately, her preparation had taken on the quality of armor being donned for battle. Hair perfectly styled, makeup applied with surgical precision, outfit chosen to project success and availability. You're up early, she said, when she found me in the kitchen, already dressed in my work clothes and nursing my second cup of coffee. Johnson furnace replacement in Painesville, I replied, not looking up from my phone. Big job, probably be there most of the day. She poured herself coffee in the travel mug Seth had given her, some expensive brand with a logo I didn't recognize. I've got showings all afternoon. Might be late getting home. Might be late getting home. The casual lie rolled off her tongue like she'd been practicing it. I wondered how many other late nights had been explained away with fictional clients and imaginary showings. Marley's got that college prep meeting at school tonight, I said. 7 o'clock. Helena paused, her mug halfway to her lips. Right, the college thing. Can you handle that? I've really got to focus on this Cleveland Heights property. Big commission potential. Of course. Our daughter's future took a back seat to Helena's real estate empire. Sure, I'll take care of it. She kissed my cheek, a perfunctory gesture that felt like a business transaction. You're the best, Kai. I don't know what I'd do without you. You're about to find out, I thought, but I just smiled and nodded. After Helena left, I sat in the kitchen for another 20 minutes, listening to the house settle around me. Marley was still asleep. Teenagers could hibernate through a tornado if you let them. The morning light coming through the windows illuminated all the small improvements we'd made over the years. New cabinets I'd installed myself. The tile backsplash Helena had picked out during one of her home improvement phases. The breakfast nook where we used to eat Sunday pancakes as a family. It all felt like evidence from someone else's life now. I drove to the job in Painesville, but my heart wasn't in it. The Johnsons were good people, retired school teachers who'd been nursing their ancient furnace through one more winter before finally admitting defeat. Normally, I enjoyed jobs like this, honest work for honest people, solving real problems with my hands and my expertise. But today, I kept thinking about Helena's messages, the casual cruelty of discussing my inadequacies with our daughter, the calculated way she'd been planning her exit strategy while I was obliviously installing heating systems and paying bills. Around noon, I took a break and called my attorney. David Kowalski had handled the paperwork when I incorporated the business, and he'd helped me navigate a few contract disputes over the years. He was one of those guys who looked like a small-town lawyer, rumpled suit, coffee-stained tie, office that smelled like old books and cigarettes he'd quit smoking 5 years ago. Kai, good to hear from you, David said when his secretary put me through. What's going on? Hypothetical question, I said, watching Mrs. Johnson tend her garden through the basement window. If someone wanted to protect their business assets in case of a divorce, what would that look like? The pause on the other end stretched long enough for me to wonder if the call had dropped. That's a hell of a hypothetical, David finally said. You and Helena having problems? Just thinking ahead, being responsible. Well, hypothetically, the business is probably your strongest asset. If you incorporated properly, which we did, and if you can demonstrate that the growth came from your labor and expertise rather than marital funds, you'd be in good shape. Joint accounts, shared credit cards, the house, that's all community property. But the business itself, your tools, your customer relationships, that's harder to divide. What about cutting off financial support? Hypothetically. Legally, you can't abandon your family, but if someone was to, say, redirect their income to a separate account while filing for legal separation, that might be different. Especially if the other party was, hypothetically, engaged in behavior that violated the marriage contract. I could hear him leaning back in his chair, the old springs creaking. David had been divorced twice himself. He understood the landscape. Thanks for the hypothetical advice, I said. Kai, if this stops being hypothetical, call me immediately. Don't do anything stupid. Define stupid. Anything that ends with you in handcuffs or bankruptcy court. I promised to stay out of both and hung up. The afternoon dragged like a broken muffler on asphalt. I finished the Johnson job, tested the new system twice, and explained the warranty terms with unusual thoroughness. Anything to avoid going home and pretending everything was normal. But eventually, I ran out of excuses. Helena's car wasn't in the driveway when I got home, which wasn't surprising. Marley was in her room, probably doing homework or more likely scrolling through social media. I could hear music playing through her closed door, something with a heavy beat that made the floorboards vibrate. I went to the kitchen and opened a beer, then sat at the table where Helena had left her iPad again. The screen was locked now, but I knew her passcode. She'd never bothered to change it from Marley's birthday. The message thread with S had continued throughout the day. S. Conference room is reserved for 3 Mo. Can you make it? Helena. Absolutely. I told Kai I had showings all afternoon. S. Perfect. I've been thinking about you all morning. Helena. Same here. I can't believe it took us this long to do this. There was a photo attached to the last message. I almost didn't open it, but morbid curiosity won out. It was a selfie of Helena and Seth in what looked like a hotel room. She was wearing the blue dress I'd complimented her on just last week. Her smile was radiant, the kind of genuine happiness I hadn't seen directed at me in months. The timestamp showed it was taken 3 hours ago. I scrolled back through their conversation history, my beer growing warm in my hand. The affair had been going on for at least 2 months, maybe longer. There were references to other meetings, other hotels, the Lakewood Inn on Route 20, a conference in Toledo, a weekend when I'd thought she was visiting her sister in Columbus. But it was the casual planning that really got to me. The way they coordinated their schedules around my work, the jokes about my obliviousness, the detailed discussions of what their future might look like together. Helena, I think I'm ready to tell him soon, maybe after the holidays. S, are you sure? It's going to get messy. Helena, it's already messy. I'm just tired of pretending. Last night when he was talking about expanding the business, all I could think about was how small his dreams are, how small everything about him is. S, you deserve better. Helena, I know, and I'm finally ready to take it. I set the iPad down and finished my beer in 3 long swallows. The kitchen felt different now, not like a home, but like a stage set for a play that was ending. All the props were still in place, but the actors had moved on to different roles. Upstairs, I could hear Marley's music still playing. My daughter, who apparently thought her mother's affair was kind of cool. My daughter, who'd been recruited as an accomplice in my humiliation. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. Our joint checking account showed Helena's usual spending patterns. Coffee shops, gas stations, the expensive salon she'd started frequenting. But there were also charges I didn't recognize. Restaurants I'd never been to. Hotels during times when she'd claimed to be showing houses. The credit card statements told the same story. Lingerie purchases from stores that definitely weren't for my benefit. Charges at a jewelry store where she'd apparently bought herself a necklace I'd never seen her wear. She'd been financing her affair with our money, planning her exit strategy with our resources, and I'd been working 60-hour weeks to pay for the privilege of being betrayed. I opened a new browser window and started researching apartments. Nothing fancy. I wasn't looking to make a statement, just to establish independence. A 1-bedroom place across town caught my eye. Month-to-month lease, utilities included, available immediately. Before I could second-guess myself, I filled out the application. Then I opened another window and started changing passwords. Bank accounts, credit cards, investment accounts, business accounts. Everything that had my name on it as the primary holder. It was methodical work, almost soothing, like organizing a toolbox or cleaning a workshop. Each changed password was a small step toward reclaiming control. By the time Helena got home at 8:30, 90 minutes late for Marley's college meeting, I had secured every financial account, applied for an apartment, and scheduled movers for the weekend. "Sorry I'm late," she called from the entryway. The Cleveland Heights showing ran long, and then the clients wanted to see 2 more properties. I was sitting in the living room, her iPad open on the coffee table, the message thread with Seth clearly visible on the screen. "How was the conference room?" I asked. Helena froze in the doorway, her face cycling through confusion, realization, and finally, resignation. She set down her purse and walked slowly to the armchair across from me. "How long have you known?" she asked. "Long enough to change all the passwords and find a new place to live." She looked at the iPad, then back at me. "Kai, we should talk about this." "We should. But first, let me save this message where you defined our new relationship terms." I took a screenshot of her friend zone text and forwarded it to my email. "There, now it's preserved for posterity." "You don't understand. Seth and I understand perfectly. You've been planning this for months. You've been using our money to finance your affair. You've been turning our daughter against me. and now you want to reclassify me as a friend. I stood up, surprising myself with how calm I felt. Well, congratulations. You're about to learn what friendship with me actually looks like. The next morning, I woke up in my own bed for what I knew would be one of the last times. Helena had spent the night in the guest room, and the house felt like a museum. Everything in its place, but nobody really living there anymore. I'd always been an early riser, but today I was up before dawn, sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop and a pot of coffee that could strip paint. The apartment application had been approved overnight. Apparently being self-employed with steady income and no criminal record made me an ideal tenant in Lakewood's competitive rental market of 3 available units. Helena appeared around 7, already dressed for work in a sharp black suit that probably cost more than most people's car payments. She moved carefully around the kitchen, like she was navigating a minefield. "We need to discuss logistics," she said, pouring coffee into her travel mug. "No, we don't," I replied, not looking up from my laptop screen. "I'll be out by Sunday. You can have the house, the mortgage, and all the utilities that go with it. Kai, be reasonable. We can work something out. Maybe counseling." "Counseling?" I laughed, and it came out harder than I'd intended. "You want to counsel your way out of 2 months of lying and cheating? That's like trying to fix a broken furnace with positive thinking." She sat down across from me, her expression shifting into what I recognized as her sales mode. The concerned, empathetic face she used with difficult clients. "Look, I know this is complicated, but we have 18 years together. We have Marley to think about. Surely we can find a way to what? Be friends?" I turned the laptop around so she could see the screen. I'd been working on transferring the utilities into her name. "I'm taking you up on that offer. Friends don't live together. Friends don't share bank accounts. Friends don't pay each other's bills." Her face went pale as she realized what she was looking at. "You can't just cut off all the utilities." "I'm not cutting them off. I'm transferring them to you. You're a successful real estate agent with a bright future and a supportive boss. You can handle a few utility bills." "What about Marley's college fund?" "What about it? It's in my name, funded by my business. Marley can apply for financial aid like everyone else. Or maybe her new stepfather-to-be can contribute to her education." Helena's sales mask slipped, revealing something closer to panic underneath. "You're being vindictive." "I'm being a friend. Friends don't support each other financially. Friends don't make long-term commitments. Friends keep things casual and uncomplicated." I closed the laptop and stood up. "Isn't that what you wanted?" Before she could answer, Marley wandered into the kitchen in her pajamas, looking like she'd been hit by a truck. 17 years old and already mastering the art of the dramatic entrance. "What's all the yelling about?" she mumbled, heading straight for the coffee pot. "Your parents are having a discussion about our living arrangements," Helena said carefully. "Dad's moving out," I added, because I'd never been good at sugarcoating things. "Your mom and I are getting divorced." Marley stopped mid-pour, coffee dripping onto the counter. "Wait, what? I thought you guys were just like having problems." "We were. Now we're having solutions." I grabbed my work jacket from the back of the chair. "I'll be back this weekend to get my things." "Dad, wait," Marley started, but I was already heading for the door. "Ask your mom about Seth," I called over my shoulder. "She'll explain everything." I spent that day installing a new HVAC system in a medical office, losing myself in the familiar rhythm of ductwork and electrical connections. Physical work had always been my therapy, the satisfaction of solving problems with tools and knowledge, of making things work better than they had before. But even the most absorbing job couldn't completely distract me from the text messages that kept lighting up my phone. "Helena, we need to talk about this rationally." "Helena, you're hurting Marley with this behavior." "Helena, I never meant for things to happen this way." "Helena, can we at least discuss financial arrangements?" I ignored them all until lunch when I finally typed back, "Friends don't need financial arrangements. Friends are independent." Around 3 o'clock, my phone rang. It was Frank Kowalski, no relation to my attorney, who owned the boxing gym where I'd been working out for the past 5 years. Frank was one of those guys who looked like he'd been carved out of a tree trunk, all shoulders and scars and gray stubble. He'd been a semi-professional fighter back in the day, before a detached retina ended his career and turned him into a trainer. "Heard through the grapevine you might be looking for a place to crash," Frank said without preamble. "News travels fast in this town. Faster than good sense usually. You okay?" I looked around the medical office, with its sterile walls and fluorescent lighting. "Define okay?" "Fair enough. Listen, I've got a studio apartment above the gym. Nothing fancy, but it's furnished and the rent's reasonable. Interested?" The apartment I'd applied for was fine, but Frank's place had possibilities. The gym was neutral territory, somewhere I could think without being surrounded by memories of my marriage. "Can I take a look tonight?" "Come by around 8. We'll talk." The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of copper tubing and electrical connections. By the time I finished the job, the sun was setting, and my phone had accumulated another dozen messages from Helena, plus a few from Marley and one from a number I didn't recognize. The unknown number turned out to be Seth. "Seth, we should meet and discuss this situation like adults." I stared at that message for a full minute before responding. Adults don't screw their employees' wives. But sure, let's be friends. His response came back immediately. "There's no need to be hostile. We can work this out. Friends don't work things out. Friends keep things simple. Where would you like to meet, friend?" A long pause, then, "Mulligan's Bar. Tomorrow night, 7 full. Perfect. Bring Helena. We'll make it a friendship party." Frank's gym occupied the bottom floor of a converted warehouse on the east side of town. The neighborhood had seen better days, but it was honest about its decline. No pretense, no gentrification, just working-class people making do with what they had. The studio apartment was exactly what Frank had promised. Nothing fancy, but clean and functional. A bed, a kitchenette, a bathroom with a shower that looked like it could strip rust off metal. The windows overlooked the gym floor, where a few diehards were still working the heavy bags. "It's not the Ritz," Frank said, leaning against the doorframe. "It's perfect." And it was. No memories, no associations, no history to complicate things. Rent's $400 a month, utilities included. Month to month, no security deposit for you. I pulled out my checkbook and wrote him a check for the first month. "When can I move in?" "Tonight, if you want." "What's the story, if you don't mind me asking?" I told him the basics, enough to explain why I was suddenly homeless, not enough to sound like I was whining. Frank listened without comment, nodding occasionally. "Women," he said when I finished. "Can't live with them, can't sell them to science." Helena would probably argue that point. She's very pro-science these days. "You want some advice from a guy who's been divorced 3 times? Shoot. Don't get mad. Get even. But be smart about it. Angry men do stupid things, and stupid things leave evidence." I thought about that as I drove back to the house to pack a bag. Frank was right about angry men and stupid decisions. But what if you weren't angry? What if you were just disappointed? Disappointed and methodical and very, very thorough. Helena's car was in the driveway when I got home, along with a silver Audi I recognized from the Pinnacle Properties parking lot. Seth had apparently decided to make himself comfortable in my house. I parked on the street and walked up the driveway, my work boots loud on the concrete. Through the living room window, I could see Helena and Seth sitting on the couch, deep in conversation. Marley was nowhere visible, probably hiding in her room. I let myself in through the front door, making enough noise to announce my arrival. Helena and Seth sprang apart like teenagers caught by their parents. "Kai," Helena said, standing up quickly. "We were just having a friendship meeting in my living room," I finished. "How thoughtful. Seth, good to see you again." Seth stood up, extending his hand like we were meeting at a Chamber of Commerce mixer. He was taller than me by a couple of inches, with the kind of artificial tan that came from expensive salons and the confidence that came from never having to fix anything with his hands. "Kai, I'm glad you're here. Helena and I were hoping we could all sit down and discuss this situation like reasonable adults." I looked at his outstretched hand for a moment, then walked past him toward the stairs. "Sorry, friend. I'm just here to pack a bag. You two carry on with your discussion." "Kai, please," Helena said. "We really do need to talk about logistics, about Marley, about the house, about how you've been planning this for months while I've been working to pay for your affair." I stopped at the bottom of the stairs and turned around. "Or about how you recruited our daughter to help humiliate me. Which logistics did you want to discuss?" Seth stepped forward, his expression shifting into what I assumed was his negotiation face. "Look, I understand you're upset, but Helena and I have developed feelings for each other. These things happen. We're all adults here." "You're absolutely right," I said. "These things do happen, and adults deal with the consequences. Helena, I'll be out of the house by Sunday. You can have Seth help you figure out how to pay the mortgage." "What do you mean?" Helena's voice had gone up an octave. "I mean, I'm removing my salary from our joint account. I'm canceling my contribution to the shared credit line. I'm transferring all the utilities to your name. You wanted independence, so I'm giving it to you." Seth's negotiation face faltered. "You can't just abandon your financial responsibilities." "I'm not abandoning anything. I'm redefining our relationship just like Helena did. Friends don't pay each other's mortgages. Friends don't share credit cards. Friends keep things separate and uncomplicated." I headed up the stairs, leaving them to process that information. Behind me, I could hear Helena's voice rising as she started to understand the implications of her new friendship status. In the bedroom, I packed a duffel bag with enough clothes and toiletries to last a few days. Everything else could wait until the weekend. As I was zipping up the bag, Marley appeared in the doorway. "Dad, are you really moving out?" I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. She had Helena's sharp features but my stubborn chin. 17 years old and caught in the middle of something she didn't fully understand. "Yeah, kiddo, I am." "Because of Seth?" "Because your mom and I want different things. She wants to explore her options, and I want to respect her choice." "But you're still going to be my dad, right?" That question hit me harder than I'd expected. "Always. But things are going to be different for a while." She nodded, trying to look more grown up than she felt. "Mom says Seth's really successful. She says he can provide better opportunities." "I'm sure he can. Seth's got a lot of things I don't have." "Like what?" "Like a willingness to sleep with married women, for starters." Marley's eyes widened. "Dad!" "Sorry, that was inappropriate." I shouldered the duffel bag. "Look, kiddo, your mom's made her choice. Now we all have to live with the consequences. But whatever happens between her and me, you're still my daughter. That doesn't change." I kissed her forehead and headed for the stairs. Helena and Seth were still in the living room, their voices low and urgent. They stopped talking when they saw me. "Kai," Helena said, "we really need to work out some kind of arrangement. I can't afford the mortgage on my own. Then I guess you'll need to sell the house. Or maybe Seth can help out. What's the point of having a successful boyfriend if he doesn't contribute to the household expenses?" Seth's jaw tightened. "This is between you and Helena." "Actually, it's between Helena and her mortgage company now. I'm just a friend, remember? Friends don't get involved in each other's financial problems." I headed for the door, then stopped and turned back. "Oh, Helena, I forwarded all the utility bills to your email address. You'll want to get those transferred into your name before they get shut off. Wouldn't want Marley to lose internet access during her senior year." The drive to Frank's gym gave me time to think. Helena's panic when she realized I was serious about the financial cutoff had been satisfying in a way I hadn't expected. For months, she'd been planning her exit strategy, assuming I'd be too weak or too attached to fight back, but she'd made a critical miscalculation. She'd assumed that because I was comfortable with our life, I was afraid of change. She'd assumed that because I loved her, I'd accept any treatment she dished out. She'd forgotten that I was the guy who'd built a business from nothing, the guy who'd learned to navigate small-town politics and customer complaints and equipment failures, the guy who'd spent 16 years solving other people's problems for a living. Helena wanted a friend? Fine. She was about to learn what friendship with a problem solver looked like. Saturday morning at Frank's gym started with the sound of someone working the speed bag like they were trying to beat it into submission. I'd been living above the gym for 3 days, and the rhythm of training had become my new alarm clock. I made coffee in the tiny kitchenette and looked out the window at the gym floor below. Frank was working with a kid who couldn't have been more than 16, teaching him footwork and basic combinations. The kid was all elbows and enthusiasm, but Frank was patient with him, the way good teachers always are. My phone had been buzzing since 6 a.m. with messages from Helena. The reality of managing a household on a real estate agent's commission was apparently setting in. Helena, the electric bill is $340. That seems high. Helena, did you know the mortgage payment includes escrow for taxes and insurance? Helena, Marley needs money for her senior pictures. Helena, we really need to discuss a temporary support arrangement. I ignored them all and headed downstairs for a workout. Frank was finishing up with the kid, who looked like he'd been put through a blender but was grinning like he'd won the lottery. Good session, Tommy, Frank said, unwrapping the kid's hands. Same time Monday? Yes, sir. Thanks, Mr. Kowalski. After Tommy left, Frank turned to me. You look like a man with something on his mind. Helena's discovering the joys of financial independence. How's that working out for her? About as well as you'd expect. She's been texting me all morning about bills and expenses. Apparently, she never paid attention to what things actually cost. Frank handed me a pair of gloves. You feel guilty about it? I thought about that while I wrapped my hands. No. Should I? Hell no. She made her choice. Now she gets to live with it. I spent the next hour working the heavy bag, losing myself in the rhythm of jab-cross-hook combinations. Physical exertion had always been my way of processing stress, and I had plenty to process. Around noon, I drove to the house to start moving my things. Helena's car wasn't there, but Seth's Audi was parked in my usual spot. I parked on the street and walked up the driveway, my footsteps echoing off the garage door. Seth answered the doorbell, which was a special kind of surreal. He was wearing khakis and a polo shirt, like he was about to play golf at the country club. The sight of him answering my door, in my house, wearing clothes that probably cost more than my monthly rent, should have made me angry. Instead, it just made me tired. Kai, he said, like we were old friends running into each other at the grocery store. Helena's at a showing, but she should be back soon. That's fine. I'm just here for my tools. He stepped aside to let me in, and I noticed he'd made himself completely at home. His jacket was hanging on the hook where I used to put mine. His keys were on the table by the door. There was a coffee mug in the sink that definitely wasn't mine or Helena's. Listen, Seth said, following me toward the garage. I want you to know this wasn't planned. Helena and we just connected. Sometimes these things happen. I stopped and looked at him. Seth, can I ask you something? Sure. Do you actually believe that? Or is that just something you tell yourself to sleep better at night? His confident expression flickered. What do you mean? I mean, you've been pursuing my wife for months. You've been meeting her in hotels and conference rooms. You've been encouraging her to see me as an obstacle to her happiness. That's not something that just happened. That's something you planned and executed. Helena's an adult. She made her own choices. You're absolutely right. And now you both get to live with those choices. I opened the garage door and started loading my tools into the truck. How's that working out so far? What do you mean? I mean, Helena's been texting me all morning about bills she can't afford. Has she mentioned that to you? Seth's expression shifted into something more guarded. Helena and I are still figuring out our arrangement. Your arrangement? I laughed, and it came out harsher than I'd intended. Seth, you just destroyed her marriage and her financial security. What exactly are you arranging? That's between Helena and me. Of course it is. Just like her mortgage payment and her utility bills and her daughter's college expenses are between Helena and her creditors. I loaded my toolbox into the truck bed. You know what the beautiful thing about friendship is, Seth? No obligations, no responsibilities, just good times and easy exits. He was starting to look uncomfortable, which was satisfying in a petty way. Look, Kai, I understand you're upset. I'm not upset. I'm liberated. For 18 years, I've been responsible for Helena's happiness, Helena's security, Helena's dreams. Now that's your job. Congratulations. I finished loading the truck and headed back into the house for the rest of my things. Seth followed me, clearly struggling to maintain his composure. Helena thinks you're being vindictive, he said. Helena thinks a lot of things. She thought I'd never find out about your affair. She thought I'd be too weak to leave. She thought she could have her cake and eat it too. I grabbed a box of books from the living room. Helena's not great at thinking things through. She's a smart woman. Smart women don't finance affairs with joint credit cards. Smart women don't turn their daughters against their fathers. Smart women don't assume their husbands will subsidize their betrayals indefinitely. Seth's phone buzzed, and he glanced at it. His expression darkened. Problem? I asked. Helena's showing fell through. The buyers got cold feet. That's too bad. Real estate can be unpredictable. Good thing she's got a supportive boyfriend to help her through the rough patches. The front door opened, and Helena walked in looking like she'd been through a tornado. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup was smudged, and her expression was somewhere between panic and rage. Kai, she said, we need to talk. Now. Hello to you too, Helena. How was your showing? Terrible. The buyers decided they wanted something in a better school district. 3 hours of my life wasted. She looked around the living room, taking in the boxes and the gaps where my things used to be. What are you doing? Moving out, like I said I would. You can't just take everything. I'm not taking everything. I'm taking my things, my tools, my books, my clothes, my personal belongings. Everything we bought together stays here. What about the furniture in your office? What about it? I need that space for my home office. Seth and I are going to be working together more closely. I looked at Seth, who was studying his phone like it contained the secrets of the universe. Seth, are you planning to move in here? We're discussing possibilities, he said without looking up. Interesting. Helena, have you told Seth about the mortgage payment? The one that's due in 2 weeks? Helena's face went pale. That's temporary. Once you get a few more sales, you'll be able to afford groceries and utilities. The mortgage is going to require something more substantial, like a second income. Seth finally looked up from his phone. What's the monthly payment? $2,800, Helena said quietly. Plus utilities, property taxes, maintenance, and insurance, I added helpfully. Figure another $1,000 a month for the basics. Seth's expression went from confident to calculating to something approaching panic. That's significant. It is, but I'm sure you two will figure something out. You're both smart, successful people with a bright future ahead of you. I picked up the last box and headed for the door. Helena, I'll be back tomorrow for the rest of my things. After that, the house is all yours. Kai, wait, Helena called after me. We really need to discuss some kind of temporary arrangement, just until I get back on my feet. I stopped at the door and turned around. Helena looked smaller somehow, like she was finally understanding the scope of what she'd set in motion. Seth was standing beside her, but there was distance between them now. Physical and emotional space that hadn't been there when I'd arrived. Helena, I said, 2 months ago, you decided I was boring. You decided my dreams were too small. You decided I wasn't the kind of man you wanted to be married to. You were probably right about all of that. Kai, but here's the thing about boring men with small dreams. We pay our bills on time. We show up when we say we will. We don't abandon our responsibilities when something better comes along. I shifted the box in my arms. You wanted excitement and bigger dreams and a more successful man. Well, now you've got all three. Enjoy them. I walked out and loaded the box into my truck. Through the living room window, I could see Helena and Seth having what looked like an intense conversation. Seth was gesturing with his hands, and Helena was shaking her head. As I drove away, I realized I felt lighter than I had in months. Not happy exactly, but free. Like I'd been carrying a weight I hadn't even realized was there until I finally set it down. My phone buzzed with another message from Helena. Please call me. We need to work something out. I deleted it without responding and kept driving toward the gym. Frank was right about getting even instead of getting mad. But he'd left out the most important part. Getting even felt a lot better when you let your enemies do most of the work themselves. Sunday evening brought the first real snow of the season, and with it, a text message that changed everything. I was sitting in my studio apartment, eating takeout Chinese and watching the flakes accumulate on the gym's skylight, when my phone buzzed with a message from a number I didn't recognize. Unknown. This is Ivy, Helena's sister. We need to talk. It's about Helena and what she's been telling people. Ivy. I hadn't thought about Helena's younger sister in months. She lived about an hour away in Cleveland, worked as a nurse at the VA hospital, and had always been the sensible one in Helena's family. Where Helena was sharp angles and ambition, Ivy was soft curves and quiet competence. She'd been at our wedding, at Marley's birthday parties, at family gatherings where she usually ended up in the kitchen helping while Helena held court in the living room. Me. What kind of things? Ivy. Not over text. Can we meet somewhere? I'm driving down to Lakewood tonight. Me. Mulligan's Bar, Route 20. I'll be there in an hour. Mulligan's was the kind of place where locals went to drink away their problems without judgment. The lighting was dim, the music was low, and the bartender minded his own business. I'd been there exactly twice in 18 years of marriage, both times for co-workers' retirement parties that Helena had found excuses to skip. I arrived early and claimed a corner booth where I could see the door. The Sunday night crowd was thin, a few regulars at the bar, a couple playing pool in the back, and a table of guys watching football on the mounted television. Ivy walked in 20 minutes later, and I almost didn't recognize her. The last time I'd seen her was at Christmas, when she'd been quiet and withdrawn. Tonight she looked different, more confident, more direct. She'd cut her hair short, and it suited her. She was wearing jeans and a sweater that emphasized curves Helena had always been jealous of. Kai, she said, sliding into the booth across from me. Thanks for meeting me. Thanks for driving down. What's going on? She ordered a beer from the waitress, then leaned forward with her elbows on the table. Helena called me yesterday. She's been telling people a very interesting version of your separation. Let me guess. I'm the villain in her story. Worse, according to Helena, you've been emotionally abusive for years. You've been controlling her finances, isolating her from friends, and threatening her when she tries to assert independence. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. She's setting up a narrative. She's setting up a legal strategy. She mentioned talking to a lawyer about claiming emotional distress and financial abuse. The waitress brought Ivy's beer, and we both sat quietly for a moment while she moved on to the next table. Outside, the snow was falling harder, coating the parking lot in a thin layer of white. There's more, Ivy said. She's been posting on social media about her journey of self-discovery and her escape from a toxic relationship. She's got people feeling sorry for her. Of course she does. Helena's always been good at managing her public image. The problem is, some people are believing her, and she's getting bolder with the lies. I took a long drink of my beer, trying to process this information. I'd expected Helena to be angry about the financial cutoff. I'd expected her to complain to friends and family, but I hadn't expected her to launch a full-scale character assassination campaign. What exactly is she saying? Ivy pulled out her phone and scrolled through what looked like Facebook posts. Here's one from yesterday. Starting over is scary, but sometimes you have to choose your mental health over financial security. Grateful for friends who understand that emotional abuse doesn't always leave visible scars. Emotional abuse? It gets worse. Some people use money as a weapon to control others. Breaking free means accepting that independence is worth more than material comfort. I stared at the phone screen, reading Helena's words. She'd taken our entire situation and flipped it inside out, casting herself as the victim and me as the oppressor. The comments below the posts were full of supportive messages from friends and acquaintances, all expressing sympathy for her courage and strength. She's good at this, I said. She's always been good at this. Remember when we were kids and she convinced Mom that I was the one who broke her jewelry box? Even though Mom saw Helena throw it down the stairs? I did remember that story. Helena had told it as an example of how she'd learned to advocate for herself in a family that favored her quieter sister. Now, I was seeing it from a different angle. Why are you telling me this, Ivy? She was quiet for a moment, peeling the label off her beer bottle. Because I've been watching Helena manipulate people my whole life, because I know what she's really like when she doesn't get her way, and because... She looked up at me. Because I never thought you deserved the way she treated you, even before all this happened. What do you mean? I mean, Helena's been complaining about you for years. Your lack of ambition, your boring hobbies, your small-town mentality. She used to call me after family gatherings and pick apart everything you said or did. That shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. Why didn't you ever say anything? What was I supposed to say? Hey, Kai, my sister thinks you're beneath her. You seemed happy. I thought maybe I was reading too much into it. I was happy. Or I thought I was. Helena's never been happy. Not really. She's always been looking for the next thing, the better thing, the thing that would finally make her feel important. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the snow fall outside. The bar was filling up with the Sunday night regulars, people who worked early shifts and needed to drink away the weekend before facing another week. There's something else, Ivy said. Helena asked me to back up her story if anyone asks. She wants me to confirm that you were controlling and that she was afraid to leave. And I told her to go to hell. I looked at Ivy. Really looked at her. She had Helena's green eyes but without the calculating coldness. Her face was rounder, softer, but there was steel underneath that I'd never noticed before. That must have gone over well. She threatened to cut me out of her life if I didn't support her. I told her that sounded like a blessing. You'd do that? Give up your relationship with your sister? Kai, Helena cut me out of her life years ago. She only calls when she needs something or wants to complain about her problems. This conversation we're having right now, it's the longest I've talked to anyone in your family in 6 months. I thought about that. Helena had always been the center of attention in her family, the successful one, the one with the big plans and the bright future. Ivy had been the responsible one, the one who took care of their parents, the one who worked a steady job and lived a quiet life. What are you going to do? I asked. I'm going to tell the truth if anyone asks. Helena's not a victim, and you're not an abuser. She made her choice, and now she's trying to rewrite history to make herself look better. That could get ugly. It's already ugly. The question is whether you're going to let her control the narrative or fight back. I finished my beer and signaled the waitress for another round. What would fighting back look like? Document everything. Save her messages, her social media posts, any evidence of her affair. Get ahead of her story before she convinces everyone you're the bad guy. That feels like stooping to her level. Sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. Helena's counting on you being too nice, too honorable to defend yourself. She's using your decency against you. The waitress brought our drinks, and I found myself really looking at Ivy for the first time in years. She was nothing like Helena. Quieter, more thoughtful, more genuine. Where Helena commanded attention, Ivy earned respect. Where Helena demanded loyalty, Ivy inspired it. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Sure. Why do you care? I mean, I appreciate the warning, but we barely know each other. You could have just stayed out of it." Ivy was quiet for a long moment, turning her beer bottle in her hands. "Because I've watched Helena hurt people my whole life. She's selfish and manipulative, and she never faces consequences for her actions. Someone always cleans up her messes or makes excuses for her behavior. And you think I should be the one to hold her accountable? I think you're the first person who's ever been in a position to hold her accountable. Everyone else, our parents, her friends, her co-workers, they all buy into her act, but you lived with her. You know what she's really like." I thought I did. Turns out I was missing some important details. You weren't missing them. You were choosing not to see them because you loved her. There's a difference. We talked for another hour, and I found myself enjoying Ivy's company more than I'd enjoyed anyone's in months. She was funny in a dry, understated way. She was smart without being condescending. She listened without judging. When we finally left the bar, the snow had stopped, and the parking lot was covered in a pristine layer of white. Ivy's car was parked next to my truck, and we stood there for a moment in the cold air, our breath forming small clouds. "Thank you," I said, "for the warning, for the advice, for being honest about your sister. Thank you for listening. And Kai, don't let her win. Helena's gotten away with being terrible her whole life because people let her. You don't have to be one of those people." She got in her car and drove away, leaving me standing in the parking lot with snow melting on my shoulders and a plan forming in my mind. Helena wanted to play the victim? Fine. But victims don't usually have detailed records of their affairs, their lies, and their financial manipulations. It was time to start documenting everything. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation and revelation. I followed Ivy's advice and started documenting everything. Screenshots of Helena's social media posts, copies of her text messages, bank records showing her affair-related expenses, emails where she discussed her exit strategy with friends. The picture that emerged was damning. Helena hadn't just been unfaithful, she'd been methodically planning to destroy my reputation while positioning herself as a sympathetic victim. She'd been telling people I was controlling and abusive while simultaneously using my money to finance her relationship with Seth. But the real revelation came when I started digging deeper into her social media activity. Helena had been more careless than she realized, and her digital trail told a story she probably didn't want made public. I was sitting in my studio apartment on a Thursday evening, scrolling through her Facebook posts from the past 6 months, when I found the smoking gun. It was a post from August, 2 months before I'd discovered the affair, where Helena had checked in at a restaurant in Toledo with Seth. The caption read, "Business dinner with the best boss ever. So grateful to work with someone who understands my potential." The timestamp showed it was posted at 11:47 p.m. Business dinners don't typically end at midnight, but hotel stays do. I cross-referenced that date with our joint credit card statements and found a charge at the Marriott in Toledo. Same date, same night. The charge was for 2 nights, even though Helena had told me she was attending a one-day conference. That led me to dig deeper into her travel history, and what I found was a pattern going back months. Business trips that lasted longer than necessary. Client meetings in cities where we had no clients. Training seminars that didn't appear on any real estate organization's calendar. Helena had been living a double life, and she'd been stupid enough to document it on social media. My phone rang while I was compiling evidence. It was Ivy. "How's the documentation project going?" she asked. "Better than expected. Your sister is apparently terrible at covering her tracks. That sounds like Helena. She's always been overconfident. I found evidence of at least 6 overnight trips with Seth, all charged to our joint credit card. Plus, social media posts that contradict her story about when the affair started. What are you going to do with all that? I'm not sure yet. Part of me wants to post it all online and let the town draw their own conclusions. That would certainly get people's attention. The question is whether it would make things better or worse. Helena's already got people feeling sorry for her. If I start posting evidence of her affair, I might look vindictive. Or you might look like someone defending himself against false accusations. I was quiet for a moment, staring out the window at the gym floor below. Frank was working with a new student, a woman in her 40s who looked like she was learning to box for the first time. Her form was terrible, but her determination was impressive. Ivy, can I ask you something personal? Sure. What happened between you and Helena? I mean, really happened? You're sisters, but you talk about her like she's a stranger. Ivy was quiet for so long, I thought the call had dropped. Helena happened, she finally said. When we were kids, she was just selfish. When we were teenagers, she was manipulative. When we became adults, she was toxic. I kept hoping she'd grow out of it, but she just got better at hiding it. There must have been good times. There were. Helena can be charming when she wants something. She can make you feel like the most important person in the world when it serves her purposes. But the moment you stop being useful, or the moment you challenge her, she turns on you. Is that what happened with you? 3 years ago, our father had a heart attack. Helena was supposed to help me coordinate his care, handle the insurance paperwork, that kind of thing. Instead, she disappeared. Didn't return calls, didn't visit the hospital, didn't help with anything. Where was she? Vacation in Mexico with some guy she was dating at the time. She said she'd already paid for the trip and couldn't get a refund. While your father was in the hospital? While our father was in the ICU, fighting for his life. When I confronted her about it, she said I was being dramatic and that Dad would understand. She actually suggested that I was jealous of her relationship. That's Helena. Everything is about her. Other people exist to serve her needs or validate her choices. When they stop doing that, they become obstacles to be removed. I thought about my 18 years of marriage, about all the times I'd made excuses for Helena's behavior or rationalized her selfishness. How many red flags had I ignored because I loved her? How many warning signs had I dismissed because I wanted to believe she was capable of change? I'm sorry, I said. I should have seen what she was doing to you. You couldn't have seen it. Helena's good at compartmentalizing. She showed you the version of herself that she wanted you to see. The ambitious wife, the devoted mother, the woman who just wanted a better life. While showing you what, exactly? The real Helena. The one who sees other people as supporting characters in her story. The one who believes the world owes her something because she's beautiful and smart and deserving. We talked for another hour, and by the time we hung up, I'd made a decision. Helena wanted to control the narrative? Fine. But she was about to learn that narratives work both ways. The next morning, I created a new Facebook account under a slightly modified version of my name and started posting. Not angry rants or bitter accusations, but simple, factual information with supporting documentation. Post 1. Interesting how some people claim financial abuse while using joint credit cards to finance affairs. Screenshots of hotel charges and romantic dinners available upon request. Post 2. For anyone wondering about the timeline of my marriage's end, here's a photo my wife posted in August with her boss. Note the timestamp and location. Business dinner at midnight in Toledo? Post 3. It's amazing what people will believe without asking for evidence. Here's some evidence for anyone interested in the truth. I didn't tag Helena or Seth directly, but I made sure to include enough details that anyone who knew our situation would understand what I was referencing. I also made sure to keep everything factual and let the evidence speak for itself. The response was immediate and dramatic. Within hours, my posts had been shared dozens of times. People I hadn't spoken to in years were commenting with support and outrage. Helena's carefully constructed victim narrative was crumbling in real time. My phone started ringing around noon. It was Helena, and she sounded panicked. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she demanded. "Telling the truth. You should try it sometime." "You're humiliating me publicly. This is harassment." "No, Helena, this is accountability. You've been lying about me for weeks, and I'm providing evidence to contradict those lies. Take those posts down immediately." "Or what? You'll claim I'm being emotionally abusive. Too late. Everyone can see the hotel receipts and the timeline now. Kai, please, we can work this out. We don't need to air our dirty laundry in public." "We? There is no we anymore, remember? You made that very clear when you decided to reclassify me as a friend." "I made a mistake. I was confused. I was going through something. You were going through Seth. For months. While lying to me, lying to our daughter, and lying to everyone else about what kind of person I am." "Seth and I are over," she said quickly. "It didn't work out. He couldn't handle the pressure." I wasn't surprised. Seth had struck me as the kind of man who was great at seduction, but terrible at commitment. The moment Helena became a liability instead of an asset, he'd probably run for the hills. "That's between you and Seth," I said. "It doesn't change anything between us." "It changes everything. I realize now that I made a terrible mistake. You're a good man, Kai. You're stable and reliable and boring. Don't forget boring. You were very clear about that. I was wrong. I was caught up in the excitement of something new, and I lost sight of what was important." "What's important, Helena?" "Our marriage, our family, our life together. Our life together ended the moment you decided I wasn't good enough for you. The moment you started planning your exit strategy while I was working to support your dreams." "I never had an exit strategy. Helena, I have copies of your emails. I know you've been talking to divorce attorneys for months. I know you've been moving money into accounts I don't have access to. I know you've been telling people I'm abusive while using my credit cards to pay for your affair." The line was quiet for a long moment. "What do you want?" she finally asked. "I want you to stop lying about me. I want you to take responsibility for your choices, and I want you to leave me alone. And if I do that, you'll take down the posts?" "Helena, the posts are staying up. The truth is staying out there. You don't get to rewrite history just because your plan didn't work out the way you expected. You're destroying my reputation." "No, Helena, I'm documenting your behavior. You destroyed your own reputation the moment you decided to cheat on your husband and then lie about it." I hung up and turned off my phone. Outside, the snow was falling again, and the gym was busy with the afternoon crowd. Frank was working with 3 different students, moving between them with the patience of someone who understood that real change took time. I thought about Helena's offer to reconcile, her sudden realization that I was a good man. It was too little, too late, and probably not even genuine. More likely, she was panicking because her social media strategy had backfired and Seth had abandoned ship. But even if her offer was genuine, even if she really had realized what she'd lost, it didn't matter. You can't unbreak trust. You can't unknow what someone really thinks of you. You can't go back to being naive once you've seen behind the curtain. Helena had shown me who she really was, and I'd finally learned to believe her. My phone buzzed with a text from Ivy. "Saw your posts. Well done. How does it feel to fight back?" Me. Liberating. Ivy. Good. Helena called me crying, asking me to talk to you. Me. What did you tell her? Ivy. I told her she made her bed and now she gets to lie in it. Alone. Me. Harsh but fair. Ivy. Want to grab dinner tonight? I'm driving down to check on a friend anyway. I stared at that message for a long moment. Ivy was Helena's sister, which made any relationship between us complicated. But she was also her own person, kind, honest, and apparently immune to Helena's manipulation. Me. I'd like that, but are you sure? This could get messy. Ivy. Kai. My sister destroyed your marriage and tried to destroy your reputation. If having dinner with you makes her uncomfortable, that sounds like a bonus. I found myself smiling for the first time in weeks. Helena wanted to control the narrative, wanted to manage everyone's perception of events, wanted to come out of this looking like the victim. But she'd forgotten something important. Stories have more than one character, and not all of them are willing to play the roles she'd assigned them. Me. Dinner sounds perfect. I know just the place. The snow continued falling outside, covering everything in a clean layer of white. Fresh starts, I thought. New beginnings, second chances for people who deserve them. Helena had made her choice months ago. Now the rest of us got to make ours.